Well, it's great to be back for the second annual Nomad Summit. I'm honored to be invited back to speak again. I'd like to start this talk with a hypothetical question. We all know Thomas Edison as being one of the most prolific inventors and entrepreneurs in American history, most notably for giving us the incandescent light bulb. Now, if Thomas Edison were alive today, and you handed him your smartphone, what app would Thomas Edison be most excited about? What app would Thomas Edison use most every single day that he would believe is the most powerful app for entrepreneurs? I want you to think about that for a second. And by the end of this talk, as we explore the idea of power, I believe we'll have the answer to that question, and it might just surprise you. Now, to understand Thomas Edison and power, we have to realize that power has made it into every area of our lives, whether we talk about power naps or power couples, the hour of power, or the power of now. We talk about battery power and Power Rangers. There's no shortage of us using the word power. But what you find out is that most people don't know what power actually is. Some people think they want it, they want to be powerful. Other people think power is evil and power corrupts. The goal of this talk is to finally come together under one simple understanding of what power actually is, and to look at it from a scientific point of view, to understand how we can use power to get more done in less time, and to live the life of our dreams. And to do that, we actually have to go much further back in time before Edison, to the days of Sir Isaac Newton. You've probably all heard of Sir Isaac Newton. When we think of Newton, we imagine him under an apple tree, and the apple falls on his head, and all of a sudden he's realized how gravity works. And it was these great scientific minds of the past who were obsessed with understanding how the world worked and how to better work in our world. And these were the scientific minds that gave us the power equation. And they distilled it to its simplest elements. Power, as it turns out, is a function of only two variables. Two variables that we can understand and we have the power to manipulate. Now, for better or for worse, one of those variables is work. You cannot become powerful or increase power in your own life without doing work. It's a necessary evil. But here we are, we're all digital nomads. We all do different kinds of work. Some of us are drop shippers. Some of us are life coaches. Some of us sell ebooks. Others are copywriters. So what is the definition of work that we can all agree upon? Well, it turns out Isaac Newton and the power equation tell us what work is. And work has three components to it, scientifically speaking. Work involves mass, acceleration, and distance. Work requires moving mass across a distance. If you cannot demonstrate that you've moved mass across a distance, Newton would tell you you have not done any work. And I think we intuitively know this to be true, especially in sports. Imagine you're working out. You're lifting a mass, a distance of 1 meter. You're obviously doing work when you're in the gym. But again, the drop shippers in the room. When you are selling a product, you're moving the product from the warehouse to the customer's door. You're moving the mass of the product, the distance to your customer's door. So everything that we think about as work can be thought of in the simple terms of moving mass across a distance. And this will be very important when we want to increase power in our lives. Even those of us who sell digital products or information products, we know that even digital files have mass. Anyone who's ever filled up a hard drive knows this to be true. So when you move a file from a server to your customer's hard drive, you have done work. You have moved mass across a distance. And here, standing on this stage, I'm doing a different kind of work. I haven't moved mass to you. We have brought you all here. That's why we think of celebrities and great performers as moving the masses. That is the work that they do. They move the masses. So all kinds of work that we think of as work can be described as moving mass across a distance. Actually, the only thing I can think of that we might consider work that doesn't fit this definition is thinking. You know, imagine the office worker sitting at his desk for an 8-hour day who does nothing but think. He says he's working. He says he's done a lot of work in his head, but he can't demonstrate it. So unless you can demonstrate that you've moved mass across a distance, I would argue that you've done no work. And that's very important for us to agree upon. But as it turns out, we're not so impressed by work on its own. Let's say I push a rock up a hill. I do the work of pushing a rock up a hill, and someone else pushes an identical rock up the same hill, but I do it in 1 hour, and he does it in 4 hours. Intuitively, we know that I'm more powerful at pushing rocks up hills, and that's because time is the second variable in the power equation. Time is a critical variable. And this is why we intuitively celebrate child prodigies, young millionaires, young entrepreneurs. It's not because of the total amount of work they're doing. It's the impressively small amount of time that they're doing it in. So not only do we want to maximize the work that we're doing, we need to minimize the time that it takes to do that. This probably seems intuitively true to most of us. And in my book, The Power Equation, I talk about plenty of tactics that we can use to do that. You can increase the work you do in the time it takes by hiring people, building teams, outsourcing, delegating. You can decrease the time it takes you to do work by batching your work. That's why instead of checking email 50 times a day, like the average person, we all check email once or twice a day. We're doing the same amount of total work, but we do it in far less time because we batch our work. But this talk isn't so much about those techniques and tactics. What I want to focus on today is what I believe is our most powerful work, the most important work that we do as digital nomads, and what separates us from the rest of the crowd. And to me, that is the work of creation. What separates us from other people is that we create. We're entrepreneurs. We're inventors. We take ideas out of our head and we put them into the real world. And that is our most powerful work. That is the work that no one else can do for you. And again, this fits the definition of work because thoughts in our mind, our electrical impulses, we know even electrons have mass. When you move those ideas out into the real world, into a physical form, you know that you have done work. And creation is our most powerful work. Now, this brings me back to Thomas Edison, one of the most prolific inventors in all of history. Over 1,000 patents in his name, inventions he made over 100 years ago that we still use today. How did he do this most powerful work of creating? One of the most creative minds in history. What was his secret to becoming a powerful creator? Well, let's look at Thomas Edison in the 1870s. How did he actually work? Now, if you've learned much about Thomas Edison, you might know that he would be sitting in his office or standing up at his chalkboard in his laboratory, and he would work by speaking his intentions out loud. He would speak his ideas, his hypotheses, his conclusions out loud. And in the corner of the room, there would be an assistant, someone known as a stenographer. And the job of the stenographer was to write down everything Edison said as quickly and as accurately as possible. Because Edison understood that he could speak faster than he could write. He could even speak faster than other people could write. That's why the stenographer would write in shorthand, just to keep up. Because Edison knew he wanted to do more work in less time. And the way to get more information out of his head and into the real world in the shortest amount of time possible was through speaking. And that's why he always worked with stenographers, so he could speak freely with no friction, no resistance, and be sure that that work was being captured for him. That was in the 1870s. And that's what set Thomas Edison on his greatest passion project. It wasn't the light bulb. What he wanted to do more than anything else, and what he believed was going to revolutionize the business world for all entrepreneurs and executives, was the simple ability to record your spoken voice. And in fact, he gave us that technology. He invented the phonograph. It was a crude device that would record sound waves on a little thin piece of tinfoil. And if you played it back, you could hardly even recognize it was a human voice. And if you listened to it more than 2 or 3 times, the quality would degrade so much, it would be completely inaudible. But still, this was a breakthrough. This was the first time in human history you could actually record the human voice in real time and play it back later. This was Edison's dream. He was pulled away from the dream to work on the electric light bulb for many years, but he did return to this concept later and eventually turned this technology into the Ediphone. This was a massive device, like a huge briefcase. It would take up your whole desk, and it had a crude little microphone sticking out of it. But finally, Edison could do his powerful work of creating, of getting information out of his head and into the real world without depending on someone else being there with him. And then he could give those recordings to his assistants or protégés later, and they could do work on it. They could transcribe it into documents, give it back to him, or send it to the appropriate people. And Edison, finally, he was free. So if Edison was here today, and you handed him your smartphone, what is the app that he would be most inspired to use, that'd be most impressed by? Voice memos, exactly. Edison would revel at the chance to reach into his pocket, pull out a handheld device, and record his voice in crystal clear quality that he could then send to his assistants to type up documents and send it back to him or send off to the appropriate person. Edison's dream workflow is now in all of our pockets today. He wouldn't be able to believe that this technology exists. This is Edison's killer app, a voice memo app. It's probably an app that most of us take for granted. That is the most powerful way of getting information out of your head and into the real world. So let me take a quick step back here. We've covered a lot so far. Hopefully now we can start to think about power a little bit differently, in more scientific terms, in terms of maximizing the work that we do while also minimizing the time it takes to do it. And hopefully we can start to understand that work only takes place when we're moving mass across a distance, whether it's the mass of a product or it's the mass of an idea out of your head and into the real world. And that the most important work and the most powerful work we can do is the work of creating, of getting those ideas out of your head and into the real world. And if we take a lesson from one of the greatest creators of all of history, Thomas Edison, we would understand that speaking our ideas, speaking our intentions, speaking our hypotheses and conclusions is the most powerful way to do the most creative work in the shortest period of time. So what does this have to do with all of us? You know, as digital nomads, we pride ourselves on being able to work from anywhere, travel the world, and conduct our business. Yesterday I was in Hong Kong. Today I'm in Thailand. Next week, maybe Vietnam. And I hear it a lot, people saying, oh, I can work anywhere that has Wi-Fi. And I think that's wonderful. We do great things online. We make amazing websites. We have e-commerce stores. We send products and information and messages to people all around the world using the internet. But what I want to make sure we don't do is we don't take for granted the offline tools available to us. Let's not forget that we have pencils and paper and a voice memo app at our fingertips that allow us to, with the least amount of friction, get information out of our head and into the real world. You know, it's easy for us to think, oh, well, that's not really powerful work. I'm not really working if I'm just recording my thoughts. But it is. It's the simplest form of creation. Now you might also be thinking, I don't have any great ideas. Hello. How's that? Or you might also be thinking, wow, this is much more powerful. Could you hear me before? I like this a lot more. Or you might be thinking, well, I don't have any great ideas. I don't have anything powerful to capture. Well, if you're in that case, I would urge you to start capturing your second thoughts. And by second thoughts, I don't mean your doubts or your worries. I mean any thought that you recognize that you've had before. Any repetitive thought that you notice, capture that immediately. They say most of the time we think we're thinking, we're actually just listening to old thoughts on repeat, like a broken record. So much of our limited brain power is being used replaying these repetitive thoughts. So that's where I would start right now. If you don't think you have great ideas, capture whatever ideas you're having right now. And by capturing those second thoughts, you might notice clues about what's important to you, what you wish to be working on, and more importantly, you'll have a chance to break that infinite loop of the repetitive thoughts and create space for your most original, most powerful ideas. So Thomas Edison taught us that in order to have a great idea, you must have a lot of ideas. And that the value of an idea lies in the using of it. I hope I've given you at least one idea today that you can use. Thank you very much.
Sean Lee. Oh, wonderful. Come on. Wonderful.